Hello everyone, my name is Cameron.
And I'm Brett.
And you're listening to The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
We know it's a dangerous business going out your door, or when choosing a podcast, but we're glad you've joined our adventure as we discuss The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
And so it begins. All right, welcome back, everybody, to this week's second breakfast. We are also dealing with Brett's... Why don't you just tell us, Brett?
Hello, everyone. I have COVID.
Yes, he does.
It came on about 5 hours ago, and but the show must go on, or the show must be recorded.
Indeed, the show must go on, and I was feeling really bad because I was like, this is like one of our beefiest second breakfast sections yet, so we'll see how much we get through, but we've kind of got it divided up into like the more important parts, and so we'll just see how much we get to today. But
Stilson, can I just say, I know when we spoke last, I talked about this being my favorite episode.
Yeah.
I was very pleased to find upon watching it second and third time that it still holds up. And
okay,
I still
that's
love
good.
it.
Yes, so did I. And I mean, as you can see by how much content we're getting out of it, right? Because we already talked for an hour in an instant reaction. And now we've got like pages of second breakfast material. So it was obviously content heavy, right? Content rich. So... anyway, let's go ahead and dive into it. So, in our instant reaction, we gave ourselves some homework and wanted to look up if Prince Durin was in fact a ring bearer in the literature.
Did you find anything for us?
Yeah, I looked, and there's nothing that unequivocally like confirms that he actually put the ring on his finger, but it does sound like it was passed down through the line of Durin from father to son until where it ends up is on Thrain's hand, right, out of The Hobbit, and Azog the Defiler cuts it off and gives it back to Sauron. So that's the ultimate fate of Durin's ring, sounds like. But
so if you had to guess, Stilson, which would you say is most likely? Would you say neither Durin or Disa wears the ring? Or does one of them, and which one would you say would wear the ring by the end of the show?
Well, it's kind of up in the air. Like, I can see a scenario where Durin just keeps it and never wears it. I can see a scenario where he keeps it and rarely wears it, except in like emergencies, like we lost all the sunlight. And I can see it in a situation where like maybe they both wear it once in a while, like it's a tool in the toolbox. Pull it out, put it on, go fix something and put it back. I don't know. My gut right now is telling me that he at least won't wear it for a bit, because he's the freshness of the corruption is on his mind.
Can I give you maybe my pushback on that? I think we've seen just how quickly this ring acted in corrupting the king, that if someone puts it on, it ain't coming off without a little bit of force.
That's a great point. 100% great point. Because, I mean, you've seen already how drastically the king has changed. The guy who had so many safety restrictions and everything like that because he was all about the people. Now he's
That's
all
a
about...
good point, yeah.
Yeah, now he's all about, get me that gold, So...
I still think there's an opportunity for them to make Durin and Disa the heroes and the good guys, and maybe they don't wear it, but I'm still holding on that Disa goes a little crazy on us.
Out of section, but a good time to bring it up. This is one of our listener questions that came up. So someone asked, so dwarves have rings, right? But so do men. The men who have the rings become the ring wraiths or the Nazgul. Why do the dwarves not end up becoming ring wraiths and Nazgul?
This is an interesting question, and I may not get it totally right, but like has kind of been mentioned in the show, these rings amplify the natural tendencies and abilities of the wearer. And in this world, men are considered, their natural state, natural man is corruptible and seeking for power. Dwarves are too, but their nature is to, Elrond says in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, just hide in the mountain and hoard their gold. And so that's what their rings end up doing, is driving that nature of let's just hoard everything we can and we'll hide away in our home and kind of stay out of other affairs. There's an interesting bit in the return, or is it the Two Towers or the Return of the King book, that you don't see in the Peter Jackson movies, when Sam actually puts on the ring that he gets from Frodo, and we see that Sam's temptation to use the One Ring is to build the greatest garden ever that takes over all of Middle Earth in flower gardens and potatoes and radishes and cabbages. And so I think that's probably what we're dealing with. For whatever reason, men are designated as the corruptible.
Yeah, I think that's similar to my opinion as well, is just Aule made the dwarves to be a pretty resilient, if not resistant people. So I think that the biggest impact it has on them is to turn them towards greed. So yeah, I think we're on the same page with that. And I also think that that's why Sauron does not really care or wish for the dwarves to have the rings after he realizes the effect it's having, Like,
tries to chase them down, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He tries to collect them afterward, right? First of all, in rewatching the episode, did you have any other insights, like right off the top, things that you were like, oh, this should have been my bad, or this should have been my great in the instant reaction? Did anything like get dethroned out of that list?
There's a big one. The great absolutely should have been Annatar's manipulation of Mirdan-nnatar as he discusses her experience in the unseen world. I must have been asleep at 1:30 a.m. But I even said, oh, did she see the Balrog? Like, no, she saw Sauron in his true form there in the forge.
Yeah.
And he's like, it was masterfully done how he turned her and, by extension, all of the elven smiths against Celebrimbor and said, oh, yeah, unfortunately, all of this work is turning Celebrimbor into this monster, and that's what you saw. And I don't know if that was an impressive bit of like damage control, if there was any bit of panic in Annatar's eyes. I didn't really detect it. He's just really good at what he does.
He is really good at what he does, and there was a probably I think 2 or 3 scenes that I went back and watched. Like as I rewatched the episode, I watched those like scene by scene to get a good look at all of them. And yeah, initially watching it, I thought that she was talking about Sauron, but as I'm watching it unfold the second and third time, I'm starting to, all right, so I'm looking at that scene through the lens of what I saw in Lord of the Rings when Frodo puts on the ring, right? As kind of the imagery that they're trying to go with, because that seems like what they made a callback to, right? It was misty and darkness, and it was like this place but different. So I'm trying to look at it through that lens as I'm rewatching it, and not a lot of what happened made sense. Like, the part where the tool gets picked up and kind of floats around, the Wingardium Leviosa moment you referred to, is like, okay, she's maybe just like exploring a little bit of the world that she's now in. But then, like, there's an explosion in the furnace, and the anvil almost drops, and I'm like, were those accidents? Are they on purpose? And then the seemingly most clear part of that scene is when she picks up the hammer, and it almost looks like she's trying to like attack someone. And all right, so when I saw it the first time, I saw that in the final sequence of that scene, she is she's in a line with her on one side, Sauron on the other side, Annatar, and Celebrimbor in the middle. And so it makes it look like, well, she was attacking Celebrimbor. But I'm wondering if in the unseen world where people like Celebrimbor kind of fade off, especially compared to a Maya, Sauron behind you, did she even see Celebrimbor, or was she just trying to attack Sauron? Then I watched it again. And it kind of looks like Celebrimbor like rotates with her. So, and that's what I can't tell. I can't tell if he's rotating with her and like she was waving a hammer off into no man's land, or if he grabs her initially, realizes he's at the back of someone, and rotates around her to get to the front. Because you can tell he's kind of looking for a ring, because he's pretty quick about finding it, right? I think he kind of knows what's going on.
He pulls it off pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that he knew that it was an elf. It was one of his smiths. They had put on the ring, and I think when he initially grabbed her, I think he rotated around her, not with her, to get to the front side of her so he could get access to pull the ring off. So that would then confirm that she was facing down Annatar with the hammer, trying to do who knows what to the fiery blaze demon before her, you know. But anyway.
Oh, and I could watch it again and again. Do you think we're going to see the unseen world in this season? Are they going to give that to us yet?
Ooh.
And more specifically, are they going to show us Sauron's true form in the unseen world? Or are they holding on to that for a little while longer?
Well, we won't see it until one of the men put on one of the rings, I would assume. And I don't know.
So it could be a season 3 thing. They seem to be teasing it, and I'm looking forward to it, so it's working.
Yes. It's definitely a huge theme. Yeah, definitely a huge theme of the show so far, the unseen world. It would make sense. I think that they just want to get it right, hopefully, and so they're waiting to figure out like what that looks like. But all right, that was a good discussion. One thing I want to talk about, so last week we talked about there being kind of a theme of greed, and it was especially outlined with the dwarves, right? Because Prince Durin is making a huge deal about it with his dad to Celebrimbor. They have the marketplace scene, you know, and also the scenes with just the king and Narvi, and just the king and Prince Durin, where everything's getting turned upside down, and it's all going towards greed. However, there's also a scene with Pharazôn and his son Kemen. We talked a little bit about it last week, but we didn't touch on that it also highlights the greed theme, where, you know, the whole thing starts off with, don't you see, or have you ever seen the White Tower of Eressëa off in the distance in the west? And it's the gateway to the Undying Lands, aka Valinor. And then he goes into this bit about, you know, as high as we climb, there's always some things that we can never achieve, because basically the Valar and the elves are keeping immortality for themselves. And his son is like, isn't the scepter good enough for you? Like, you have the scepter now, isn't that enough? And another question I had in my mind was like, you're living for like 350 years or something like that. Like, isn't that enough? Like, seems like a long time. And what are you planning on getting at? And it also makes you think like, okay, given immortality, then what? Like your attitude is you're so driven by greed that it doesn't matter what you have, you're going to want the next highest thing, right?
And ironically, the next logical step for him is, well, let's go to war with the enemy that is most likely to end my mortality. Let's go to war with the gods.
Exactly.
That's just how mad he's been deceived and will be deceived probably next season.
Which I think I can't remember if I've brought this up in previous episodes, but yeah, it's exactly, and this is kind of giving away part of season 3 maybe, but you'll probably forget by then. But that's exactly the dichotomy with Farazan, right? And honestly, most times that we give in to poor choices is that if we would have just done, the right thing, if Farazan would have led his people in unity against Sauron into Middle-earth, he would have had the greatest kingdom probably ever in all of Eru Ilúvatar's creation, and been viewed as, the king of the world almost, so to speak, right? Because honestly, if that would have happened, evil would have been so soundly defeated, I believe, that all the elves would have gone back to Valinor. There was just some serious military might in Numenor around this time.
There's a connection. You talk about just the dichotomy of Farazan, right? We also see it with Annatar and Celebrimbor when he's saying, well, you have two options now. You can either go back to the High King and do the impossible of confessing what you've done wrong. And he makes the right option just seem so impossible that the only logical choice is to, as he says, or we can do this together and go further into the maelstrom. You talk about a Satan character right there. My goodness, that was quite the line.
Yeah, what's easier? Is it easier for you to own up to your mistakes and, face the big guy, or is it easier to just keep making more mistakes?
Right. I do want to bring up something else from there, but back to Farazan and Kemen. What do you get after reviewing his little tease of his Kemen's mother's prophecy? What are we dealing with here? It seems like there's some options, but what's Farazan playing at here with his son?
Well, he's obviously playing him, right? I don't think Farazan really has that much respect for his son. Maybe it's even due to the prophecy. Maybe the prophecy was that he's going to be this big failure and disappointment and go evil and all that kind of stuff.
So we have a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and so maybe Farazan is like, well, I don't want to associate myself with that, And so, but as of how he's using it right now is definitely just manipulating his son to his own selfish ends, right? We will see. What do you think?
I was a little confused at the tactic of kind of enticing Kemen to go on this top secret mission, which I don't think was kill Valandil. I think it has more to do with getting Elendil off trail. And
left behind.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting that he's teasing him with this, well, I'll tell you the rest of the story that was prophesied about you when you were a babe in your mother's arms if you do this task. I'm like, well, he already knows that he's been prophesied to have an ill end. I'm not sure how eager I would be to go do something morally questionable to find out even more about this ill end. But maybe that's just me.
Well, and it honestly all depends on like what your view of an afterlife is, right? Because I think Tolkien kind of leaves a big question mark for men in their afterlife, right? Elves go back to the halls of Mandos, but everybody else, you know, who knows? Not saying that they don't do anything, but he does leave, maybe on purpose, a big question mark. And so if you don't think there is anything else, then that would probably change how
It
you
seems like
acted.
it seems like the Numenorians are motivated by this fact that they will die and that is the end. Hence, they want to go claim immortality.
Yes.
Is that off base at all?
No, it's not. And I think it just is honestly like a basic greed thing, right? Where someone has something that I don't, and therefore, because like if there were no elves, if they did not know about the elves, and all they had was the Southlanders and the dwarves and the hobbits, like what they wouldn't, they would just fight amongst themselves at that point. They would just have civil wars at that point, because they've already achieved the pinnacle. So then it's all about, well, I want the pinnacle. No, I want the pinnacle, you know. So that's my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree 100%. Anything else in Numenor? I know we had a somewhat confusing conversation with Elendil and Muriel. Did you get any clarification or questions answered based on that scene?
So there was something that I thought about. So when they're at the shrine and Valendil dies, first of all, when they're doing the ceremony, I forgot to mention in the instant reaction, even though I noticed it then, was the callback to Gandalf in The Return of the King, where they refer to the afterlife in the verbiage of a far green country under a swift sunrise. So maybe that's in like the Eru Bible or something. I'm
Yeah,
not
the
sure.
sacred texts. Yep.
Yeah. A question that I had was, so after Valendil dies, Kemen says to the guards, inform the jailer that he, meaning Elendil, was the one who started the uprising. So my question is, was it the uprising contained within the shrine that he's talking about, or is this part of Farazan's like secret mission, is that he wants Kemen to stage what looks like a faithful uprising so that then they can squash or quash, whatever that word is, the faithful, even more than they are, because already they're kind of being persecuted a little bit. But is he trying to stage a actual uprising of the faithful so that they can then just get them all out of there?
Yeah, I wonder if Kemen has the foresight to play a long game, like, oh, let's get the faithful riled up and get into a civil war, and then we overpower them in a civil war. I definitely see it as this is the true objective, is let's get Elendil in jail or otherwise eliminated. I think Valendil was just a happy little accident that happened for him.
Yeah, I think so too. It'll just be interesting in the next episode to see if it was referring to like a Numenor wide uprising that they were trying to stage, or if it was it just him saying that, like, make sure everybody knows that it's Elendil's fault that Valendil died, kind of a thing, as small as that is versus the Civil War level uprising. So we'll see what that is.
I
Go
have one
ahead.
thought on Valendil. We talked in our instant reaction and on our Instagram page about the disdain we have for Kemen and Aorin for Valendil leaving us. Should we really be mad at the Valendil actor? Like, is there any reason why he would be killed other than the actor didn't want to be on the show anymore? Because I thought it was a fun character and I thought he was doing really well.
True. It does kind of help cement Kemen's nastiness and evil. It always is good for the audience to have a good guy die.
Right, right. I did come across that in the lore, according to lore, Isildur's fourth son is named Valandil. And so maybe we've just gotten the backstory on why one of his sons is named Valandil.
I like that. One other scene that I watched a couple of times in Numenor was that really confusing scene with Elendil and Miriel. I was so confused the first time watching it that I went back and transcribed the text. So it looks like, from what I can tell, I remember we had the question of when she says this is my command, what is she referring to? So what she says after they discuss what'd you see in the Palantir, what did it mean, maybe it's changed. Then Muriel says, not every battle must be fought to be won. Sometimes maintaining stillness of heart is the greatest victory of all, the greatest act of faith one can perform. Elendil, I don't understand. Muriel says, for years that Palantir has shown me only our island's downfall, but when you touched it, that vision was gone, changed to a new path. Pharazon's kingship is part of that path, and so are you. You have asked for my command, now it is given. Kate, pause. So up to that point, it seems like everything that she is referring to so far is for him to do nothing, to have this stillness of heart. And maybe that doesn't mean don't do anything.
Not entirely laissez-faire, right?
Yeah, but at least morally stay put, I guess, is a good way to say it, right? And anyway, she continues to go on after that. She says, here's my command, now it is given. And Elendil goes to walk away, meaning he either is so utterly confused that he has no idea what she's talking about, just walks away, or he understood what she meant and is walking away, right? And Muriel grabs him and says, no matter how hard they push you, no matter what they try to take, you must not jeopardize Numenor's new destiny. You must remain the calm at the storm's eye, and then go back to your ship, Captain. So, question is, why is she so fixated now that the vision must be seen through, must come to pass? Where before it seemed like it was all about how can we avoid this great catastrophe? What do you think?
I think the answer is in what you just said. I think that with the coup of supplanting Muriel and installing Pharazon, that essentially was the point of no return. If you're talking about destiny and chain of events and that sort of thing. And so I wonder if the Palantir is now saying, okay, well, that great wave is now certain. Your destruction is made sure. And so here is a vision, and she clearly doesn't understand what it means exactly, but here is a vision of this new path, this new destiny, which includes Pharazon running Numenor into the ocean and Elendil escaping the city and carrying on the tradition and legend and valor of Valinor.
Yeah. So, what do you think that do you think Elendil understood everything? What do you think how do you think he's done so far in executing that plan? Do you think that it seems like he's going to get thrown in prison? Do you think that that's going to be, is that part of her intention? Obviously not wanting him to be thrown in prison, but is that what she would have rather happened in that scenario, or something else? What do you think about all that?
I think he understands exactly what he said. He's like, I don't understand. And I think that's a fair comment. I think he's he understands the near-term expectation of we just gotta hold peace and just let things play out for now. He understandably lands an awesome punch on Kemen, which was one of the best TV punches I've ever seen.
Yes. Yes.
That may come back to haunt him. I do think there's a little bit of symbolic imagery in her line, "Go back to your ship," in that his destiny is going to take him sailing across to Middle-earth again.
Yeah, and on that note, I do think it's kind of cool how she has become similar to her father in seeming to come off as kind of a seer, And so I think that's kind of cool. No Palantir necessary at this point, I guess, but she kind of is a bit of a seer in what she's telling Elendil there. We'll see if he understands the go back to your ship part before it actually happens. But one more thing, did you think there was anything significant about the vision that he saw in the Palantir?
I don't know enough about the lore to interpret that vision.
Yeah.
Maybe you did.
Well, I just don't think there's enough to go off of. One thing I noticed in watching it the second time is it seems like there's smoke rising from the city. So at least parts of the city are on fire. The sun is we're either at dawn or dusk. And depending on if we're at dawn or dusk, he's either riding east or west. And if he's riding east, he's riding towards the harbor with all of his ships. If he's riding west, he's riding to his homeland and Dunier, where normally his father would be the Lord. His father is Amandil. But I don't think that he's going to be an actual character in the show because he hasn't been already. In the lore, he's actually a member of the King's Council and is kind of the chief leader on Numenor of the Faithful. So when Pharazôn takes power, it's Elendil's father, Amandil, that kind of protects the faithful and helps the faithful get out of town when that time comes. And is also the one who tells Elendil to take all this stuff, get on a ship, and get out of here. And so it seems like they have kind of replaced him, at least his council role, with Muriel. Which is, that's not a bad choice in my opinion, but just something different from the text. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had for Numenor. Do you have anything else?
Just one question. Well, one point dealing with Kemen. I gotta say, my bold prediction on Theo being the Witch King, I think, is just not holding up very well, and you knew that. But
we need to have a moment of silence.
Gosh, man, this is rough. Season 3 will be better, I promise, folks. They're putting Kemen up kind of at odds with his father, putting him in perfect position to say, I can be a better ruler than this clown.
Yep. Or at least give him something to feel like he's got something to prove, right?
Yes, and I wonder if we know we're going to see some interactions at some point between Pharazôn and Sauron, but I'm looking forward to seeing the interactions between Sauron and Kemen, because Pharazôn we expect will go down with the ship, but Kemen is this heretofore unknown character that doesn't make any sense unless he is a big bad. And I've got to say, I think y'all are spot on with calling him as the Witch King.
Yeah. So let's get into that really quick too. We'll skip down to the predictions portion just for a second. And so in the instant reaction, we kind of wanted Matt to clarify. Matt's in New Zealand, by the way. So he's busy living it up in work. Yeah, he's busy living it up in the Shire for a second. And anyway, so we wanted him to clarify a little bit on his prediction concerning Kemen, because I had the understanding that Kemen had to kill Aarion in order to become a Nazgul. His prediction was that Kemen would become a Nazgul. And it sounds like from what Matt told us, that he thinks that Arian dies and it's in the flood, and that it is her death that drives Kemen to become a Nazgul. Not that he has to kill her, but that her death in the flood drives him to become a Nazgul. So we shall see. But yeah, he's also adding on to it, like Brett said, that he will be the Witch King. And I think that I can get behind that. The only thing that makes me doubt that, and we'll see how they develop his character later on, but the Witch King is understood to be like this sorcerer king, right? Witch King. I mean, as the name says, right? So is the king part possible for Kemen? Absolutely, especially if he goes over to Middle Earth with Elendil in the ships, right? He can land in the north and start a little kingdom, and that's very, very plausible. The part that I don't know how they're going to get into, because they haven't even like hinted at it at all with Kemen or anyone in Numenor, to be quite honest, is the sorcery part. And maybe that'll come out when Sauron is introduced. Maybe Sauron, when he comes to Numenor, is going to be like, let me show you a few tricks, you know? And he and Kemen all of a sudden get to be BFFs. So I think it's a solid prediction. I'm behind it. I'm just interested to see how the whole sorcery thing unfolds.
Very good. Shall we head back to Middle Earth?
Let's do it.
We got a vision. Gil-galad, using his ring of power, sees a vision that includes some walls tumbling, a close-up of a fish eye, and then hundreds of fish flopping around on the ground, and then Sauron in his military getup. Anything of note from that, Stilson?
Well, I think you should say your image quality comment first.
Does that make sense to you? Okay, so this is what I thought. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I watched it again and I saw the same thing. It seems like we're getting kind of old satellite TV, rabbit ear antenna, 80s National Geographic video quality on this vision.
100%. It totally made me think. Too. Yeah, it totally made me think of like the recent King Kong movies, in like the opening credits or whatever, when it does the flashback videos of what's that organization of Monarch, when they're like showing, here's a 50-year-old footage of King Kong that we got, you know, almost like Sasquatch sighting footage. And yeah, just exactly what you're saying.
So is that telling us that Gil-galad's, you know, he doesn't have the 4K HD powers unlocked yet? Does he need to upgrade for 36 months? You know,
I don't know, because that was kind of my thing too. Of like, I think we would have understood it was a vision if you put it in, you know, the normal consistent quality of the show. I wasn't quite sure. Were they trying to say that it's not a very clear vision? I'm not sure, because you think about the other visions that we've seen in the show so far, like with the Palantir last season. It was clear that it was a vision. It was clear in what it was depicting, you know? So who knows why they chose to do that. Yeah, who knows?
I want to know who this gal is behind him. Like, how dare you? Like, she is smack talking the High King. What do you think you're doing listening to that? I'm like, who are you? Like, Galadriel, okay, that's one thing. She's hundreds of years older than Gil-galad, but who's this rando?
Yeah.
That was odd for me. That I would have made that my bad if I could go back.
Yeah, she was kind of pushing him, wasn't she? Something that I thought was interesting about that, well, a couple things. First thing is, you saw it seemed like there was just like some explosions, maybe. It kind of looked like Mount St. Helens had footage where, you know, part of a mountain was a landslide or something. And then there was the scene where the fish were out of water and gasping at breath. And I I think the only thing I can think of with all that is somehow the orcs are going to use some sort of blasting to create this massive earthen dam that blocks the river, that effectively acts as a giant moat around Eregion so that they can then actually lay siege and invade. So I think that's probably what we'll see in this next episode is um, the dam or whatever, and then Eregion, the river getting drained. But I guess that's the only thing I can take from that vision. What do you think?
Not from the vision, but from his direction to Elrond when Elrond shows up. And it seems like while he's out on his jog through Middle Earth, he's come to the realization that Galadriel's right, and maybe we should listen to her a little more. Gil-galad drops the line of, we cannot defeat Sauron's armies alone, which I think is leading us right into, and we've seen it in the trailers, Elrond's going to be going to, I don't know how he's going to get there in time, but there is a scene of Elrond saying to Durin, I need your axe, old friend. And I'm excited to see that because, one, it's a nice little callback to the Fellowship of the Ring. You have my sword and my bow and my axe.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, good call.
Also, it's a really good contrast to what we just saw in this episode when King Durin says to his son, give me your axe. And kind of this demanding... Yes. We kind of got this symbol of the axe of Prince Durin, and what is Prince Durin going to allow his axe to stand for? Is he going to stand with his father, or is he going to stand with the elves?
I love that. Amazon should take that for a preview or commercial, honestly.
You're welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can make that payable to Brett Meekum. So
pay for the COVID bills.
Exactly. So something else that I wanted to talk about with the Gil-galad and Elrond thing is, so he says that he has reason to believe that Sauron is behind it, that he's orchestrating everything, right? And like you said, we can't defeat him with our armies alone. So is that him saying, like, we're staying here? Screw Eregion. Like, too bad. And if he is saying that, it's pretty disappointing and very anti-Gil-galad, in my opinion. It seems like it would have been better for him to just be more characteristic of him to be like, yeah, get him on the road, tell him to run. They better get going. Yeah, what do you think about that?
I honestly tried not to give too much thought to that discussion because it seemed like kind of a tag on at the end of an episode. The whole thing felt a little clunky to me, so I just kind of tried to ignore it, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
It didn't seem totally in character with Gil-galad, kind of like you're saying, and that's kind of what we get with these multi-season shows where you've got literally different writers and different directors for every episode. And so there's going to be choices made from a director's standpoint or a writer's standpoint that may not totally jive with what we've seen earlier on. So that's kind of what I chalked it up to. It kind of bugged me, and I'm trying not to think about it.
Let me ask you this real quick. What do you think, we kind of hinted at it last time, but what do you think is going to be the crux that, or the catalyst that finally gets Elrond and Galadriel back on the same page? I know you mentioned the healing thing, right? You think Galadriel's going to be mortally wounded, and Elrond is going to have to use the ring to heal her. Possible, but I kind of think that well, it could do the trick, actually. Is that still what you're thinking? Is she's going to be mortally wounded?
I think so, and I think they've made it such a point that Elrond now has the ring. Like, they showed him holding it again this episode, like Galadriel, like, and they've made it such a point that he is now the holder of this ring, if not the wearer, that I think that's got to come into play
Yeah,
by the
at
end.
some point. Yeah, she didn't give it to him for nothing, right? I agree. Because actually, in the lore, the 3 elven rings are able to be hidden or concealed while wearing them. So the wearer or the bearer is not invisible, but the ring is concealed on the bearer's hand. So they could have easily gone to that route and just had her keep it and shown off another nugget of, of lore with the ring going invisible on her hand. But instead they chose to give it to Elrond. So I do agree, like you're saying, there's something, right? Something's going to happen with Elrond in that ring and it's going to change his mind. So with Sauron turning the smiths against Celebrimbor, what do you think is the purpose there?
So if we go back to our favorite character's demise in episode 1, when Waldrick was devoured, we get the shot of Halbrand, Sauron, chuckling to himself on the way out. So we know that it is in his character to have a little fun with just absolutely ruining people.
True.
And I wonder if we're seeing some darkness at play where he is just reveling in this idea that he's not only got Celebrimbor as his slave, but he's going to turn everyone else against him too, and just watch him.
True.
You look at those shots of Celebrimbor at the end, and it's terrifying, it's haunting, it's quite sad. It reminds me of someone who's like in an anxiety attack or realizes they've done something terribly wrong, which I think Celebrimbor realizes who he is dealing with, but he's just so terrified that he can't get himself out.
He doesn't like the direction, but he feels out of his depth, and he is out of his depth, and so he doesn't know how to correct course. And yeah, I think that's what's going on, and the sheer panic of his legacy being in his grasp, and yet just corrupted into mush in his hand because of Sauron is, I think it's causing some serious panic and anxiety.
We know they kind of dropped a line. Sauron says, if you would just give us this one bit of counsel as to what we should have done, rather than add more mithril, that would be so great. And he's about to tell him, but he gets interrupted. Is that supposed to be significant? What are we doing there?
That was the other thing I was going to ask you about. So, the scene you're referring to is when, after he takes off the ring from Mirdan-nnatar, he's like, what did you do differently? And she says, we put more mithril in it. And he was like, oh, if you wanted to fix that problem, you should have, and then stops himself. And Sauron Annatar is like, no, tell us, what were you going to say? And the question I had when watching that was, first of all, what stopped him from saying it, right? And then the next was it actually his idea this time? Or was it one planted in there by Sauron, and Sauron is still pulling all the strings? Because, it's been confusing this entire time why Sauron needs Celebrimbor. Sauron is a far superior smith than Celebrimbor. He learned at the feet of Aule, for crying out loud, right? And he's a Maya. So, more powerful being, learning from the best master ever. Obviously, Sauron is a better smith. So, what do you think about the questions I asked myself?
I've got something here for you. We'll see if we can get it out. My head is about to explode with all of this knowledge and COVID. So we talk about Sauron pulling the strings. We talk about him turning the Smiths against Celebrimbor. I wonder if he just saw this as an opportunity of, oh, well, let's get Celebrimbor to drop some big bit of knowledge, and then whatever we do, yep, we'll do it, but I'll throw in some extra bit of malice into that. And the Elven Smiths will see that and say, well, Celebrimbor he's totally diminished, he's totally on the dark side, like, we've got to get rid of him. And I wonder if that's part of the plot to get him to fully revolt.
Yeah. Well,
just an idea.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds this next week, because I'm very interested to see how, honestly, all these storylines are going to unfold. I want to see what Galadriel tells Adar. I want to see, because she knows a lot more than he does. And he's going to tell her that Halbrand told him that Sauron is in the city. And she's going to try and set him straight, obviously, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens between the two of them.
Oh, it's man, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yep, it's going to be interesting.
He said.
Exactly. And it's going to be interesting to see how Sauron ends up becoming the leader of the orc army after this. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Kemen and Elendil, because it looks like Elendil's going to prison, and Muriel. We're just on the precipice of a lot of things tipping the scale, I think. So it's getting pretty exciting. Before we get to the fan comments and questions, I want to add one more bold prediction at this time. So I have just one bold prediction that I want to add to our list. I think that, so one of the Nazgul, the only one we know the name of, Khamul, I think that he's traditionally in the lore an Easterling, and I think that he is actually one of those Tusken Raider riders with the skin disease. We will see, and that's probably my what would you call it, most flimsy bold prediction, but I'm adding it. I'm putting a stake in the ground right here. So
let it be written.
Yep. So yeah, should we move on to our listener questions, comments?
Let's do it. We heard from Matt in Hartville, Ohio, and he took some issue. Thanks, Matt, for writing in. You took some issue with our opinion of Arondir. Stilson, you want to tell everyone what Matt thinks about Arondir?
Well, I kind of agree with what he was trying to say. I think he mentioned just that a lot of people like Arondir and we don't. And the thing is, I think we like Arondir. He's like a good man, right? I think that we just get frustrated with how stupid his decisions were in the second half of season 1. So far, he's really not been that stupid. At least not like he was in the second half of season 1. But in the second half of season 1, yeah, he was kind of the linchpin of all the crap that happened in the Southlands. And so that's what we take issue with Arondir, not necessarily who he is as a person. And I don't think he's done anything in this second season that's particularly egregious. What do you think, Brett?
I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. His actions were directly responsible for a lot of the things that happened. And I think to his credit and to Matt's credit from Ohio, I think we're seeing Arondir recognize that in this season. The brief minutes that we've seen him on screen. And maybe the way he takes down Damrod, if he does in the next couple episodes, redeems a big portion of that. But the jury's still out for me.
And it would be really cool if he could act as... Maybe it's already described his origin story. I know it says he's from... or he was born in Beleriand in the First Age, right? But it would be interesting to see if he has some connection with the Sylvan Elves in... Isn't it Rovanian that the Sylvan Elves live? Anyway, I'll need to look that up, but if he has some connection with them and can act maybe as the liaison between Gil-galad and them for the Battle of the Last Alliance. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. He had one more question for us, and I think this is good. It touches on the last bit from Sauron in The Forge. He says, a semi-popular fan theory on social media is that Mirdan-nnatar is actually Celebrion, Galadriel's daughter, using a fake name. Perhaps they're estranged, or Galadriel thinks she's dead for some reason. Well, she thinks her husband's dead. That makes sense. He says, the scene with Annatar fanned the flames on that theory. What do you think of that? And he's referring, of course, to this little flirtatious moment where he says, oh, you look just like Galadriel. What do you think? Is this Galadriel's daughter?
My gut tells me no, because Galadriel's been around Eregion at this point already. I'm not saying that she would have had to run into her, and maybe Matt is trying to make the point that she's estranged and might not recognize her at all. Anyway, and to note, we hadn't heard about that because I think we kind of made the commitment at the beginning, right, that we weren't going to try and be influenced by a lot of the non-literature stuff during the season. So, yeah, this was our first time hearing about this. I think it's got a decent foundation. I just don't see the point. And I think if they come out and say that this is going to be Elrond's future wife and Galadriel's daughter, at this point, it'd be a little bit bad form for me because of the whole Celeborn thing. If they're gonna keep Celeborn out of the story, why are they putting Galadriel's daughter in the story? Who I don't know any passage at all that refers to her at all, besides that she married Elrond. So
we asked our editor, Matt. We've had like 7 Matts call into the show, send us messages. Our editor is Matt. So Matt, the editor, we asked him what he thought. He said, I thought it was more of a move to get her to trust him because she can now help lead the other elven smiths in thinking Brimby is crazy. What elven girl wouldn't want to be compared to Galadriel, the commander of the northern armies? And I think that's the crux for me. He was paying her the highest of compliments, and she is head over heels of this guy now.
Totally. That was what he was trying to do with the little flick of his hair. Look at how golden it is. It looks just like Galadriel's. His other question was, could the Palantir be the one that eventually became known as Elendil Stone or the Elastirian Stone? And that was a great connection. I hadn't thought about that. So, and he goes on to expand on that pretty well. It says Elendil placed it in a tower in Elastirion, which he used to take back to the west. Although he could not see Numenor because it was covered in water, it was unique in that it couldn't be used for communication with the other stones, and that seems to fit this one. Maybe after the fall of Numenor, it will permanently wire itself to look west along the straight path towards the Undying Lands, which is what the Elastirian Stone does, or Elendil Stone does. And I think that's a great, we'll call that Matt from Ohio's bold prediction. I think that's a great bold prediction because, yeah, the Palantir that they're dealing with right now seems to be able to get fixated in one direction or on one topic. And as you pointed out, the Elendil Stone, he trains to be always looking at the Undying Lands. So I think that's a great connection.
Matt, you may disagree with us, and if you do, send us another email. Let us know where we're wrong. Thanks so much for writing in.
We did have a couple other questions from people. So one of them is for you, Brett, before you pass out over there. So Brett said last week that the dwarves are what caused Celebrimbor's hesitancy for the 9 rings being made, but it seems like the dwarven rings are what's actually motivating him toward making the 9 rings. What do you think about that, Brett?
I think that's true. I think we saw an evolution of Celebrimbor's motivations. He initially was like, uh, no, we can't. Well, you know what? You may have got me. I may be wrong. It does seem like at the end that the bit of influence Sauron has over him is like, we need to redeem the seven, and your name can be saved if we redeem the seven and we just make this thrice forged, 3 times perfected set of rings. So maybe I need to backtrack on that a little bit. I think ultimately Celebrimbor's fault is that he just, above anything else, does not want to be seen as a failure in any way, and he's committed to that to his detriment.
Yep, he wants to be Fëanor Part 2, right? And he wants to have that legacy. And he's desperate for it. So I think that the imperfection, and maybe this is what it is, like you said, an evolution, right? Where the imperfection or the fault in the seven initially made him balk at it when he didn't quite know what to do and was kind of in the initial stages of like disbelief, depression a little bit, probably not knowing what to do. And maybe what ended up happening is once he figured out a plan, then he was like, no, we're going to fix this. So I think you're right with the evolution thing. Okay, next question is, can you remind us what Theo is the lord of, and is there any significance to that?
So Arondir calls him at their farewell meeting. He says, blah, 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 Elvish, Lord of Pelargir. Pelargir is this little settlement we've seen them hanging out in. They've got the aqueducts, which are super cool. And
Yep.
this is a Numenorian Middle-earth outpost, right? For me, the
established
significance...
for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think to me, the major significance of this scene is giving Theo a title of Lord, which could play into either King of the Dead or a Nazgul. I don't think he's the Witch King, but whether or not he is one, I think it's dangling the carrot out there for us to chase for a little bit.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if that sticks, because Arondir is a foot soldier elf, right? And Theo is the son of a healer from the
What
Southlands,
authority
which
does
is now
Arondir have?
none.
Sorry.
And Theo has no birthright. So the moment a Numenorian steps foot in there, you know.
Or does he have birthright? We still don't know.
Oh, yeah, with his father. That's a great point. So we shall see on that one, I guess, huh? And then the last question we've got is, why do so many Numenorians hate the elves? And I think we kind of touched on that. In Tolkien's writings, he kind of lays out that the downfall and the pride of Numenor comes because of a fear of death, and that the fear of death comes into the hearts of the men of Numenor when the influence of Morgoth and Sauron is abundant in the land, or is spreading in the land, right? And so they don't like elves because they are, in my opinion, because they're jealous, right? The elves have what the Edain cannot have: immortality. And they're just a higher race, honestly, all around. They see better, they all their senses are better, they're stronger, they're faster, they're more resilient, greater endurance, greater stamina. So
I think the key in that question is, why do some of the Numenorians hate the elves? Obviously, not all
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
There are the faithful,
there are some faithful,
which is the theme. Yep.
That's a good point. And yeah, for the faithful, they obviously take the elves as role models, right? Instead of being envious. So it's kind of like a older brother, youngest brother relationship a little bit, where they're either going, the younger brother's either going to hate the older brother, or he's going to take him as a role model. One of the two. Anyway. All right. So that actually is it for all of the questions. And the only thing we have left is the story time. We mentioned that we would talk about the stories behind the men that Sauron mentions to Celebrimbor, but
I gotta go to bed.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to have story time on another second breakfast, but I will say I'm looking forward to it because some of the stories in there, and I was reading up a little bit in the Silmarillion on some of these after the episode last week, and my goodness, if Amazon, or honestly if anyone else, decides to undertake the First Age stories and gets the rights to do it, it's gonna be epic. It's gonna be epic. So good stories, love story time, probably in the next second breakfast.
Keep sending in your questions. It was a lot of fun hearing from so many of you this week. Awesome episode. We're in the home stretch now. Just 3 episodes left and coming out in just a couple days.
Thank you for joining our fellowship on this episode of The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode even half as well as you should have liked, or liked half of it half as well as it deserved, please subscribe, comment, and share.
We'll see you next time.